Okay, Sevra, let's get started. Okay, so we're now studying Hilchos Halva'a. Um, oh, sorry. Yeah. And the question is there a mitzvah to lend money to a wealthy person, or based on the language of the pasuk, it says Et ani imach, only the poor person is really addressed by the pasuk. So is there still a mitzvah to lend money to a wealthy person? And the answer is afilu ashir b'shashu dachuk. He says even a wealthy person, when he's pressed for cash, kagon liknot schara litzarch parnasato, like he needs to be liquid in order to be able to buy merchandise for his business. Mitzvah lahalvota lefisha. There too, there's a biblical mitzvah to lend him, ulahanoto af bidvarim, or at least to provide him with whatever benefit you can with your words. For example, if you have the ability to make a phone call for him in order to persuade someone to sell him merchandise, that's considered to be a mitzvah to help another Jew. So and also to offer him proper business advice. Shaharei nemar stam im kesef talve'et ami, because the first part of the pasuk says, "When you lend money to my nation." So it just says Amin. My nation is inclusive of all Jews. V'hakol b'mashma. Everyone is therefore included in that. And therefore, it's not just a loan of cash, it's also uh, lending a person your advice. And let's see. So the Gemara actually says that if you have the opportunity to lend money to two people, one is an ani and one is an ashir, the ani comes first. Okay, but barring that, if there's only one person to lend money to and he's an usher, you see from there that there's a mitzvah to lend him money. Okay, let us go on. Next she'ela. Mahadin kasher ein la'adam efsharut lahalvot l'chol hanitzrachim v'yesh lefanav karov mishpacha ve'eno karov mishpacha lemi yakdim tchila. We know when it comes to the laws of tzedakah, there's a hierarchy of need, and if someone is from your family, they have a mitzvah. You have a mitzvah to give them tzedakah before you give a non-relative tzedakah. Does the same apply to loans? Okay, I only have a limited number of resources to lend I don't have unlimited cash. I have a couple of people that have approached me. One is a relative and one is a non-relative. Well, then I got to think who's going to pay me back, you know. So sometimes it could be a brother-in-law, who's you know, I may never get the money back from him. But if both all things are equal, let's see. Tshuva, kishem shetzorach lahaktim lekrovav lani yiro b'nesina sat tzedakah, kach krovav aniyim kodmim b'mitzvah salva. So just like there's priority given to your relatives and your local residents for the laws of tzedakah, the exact same thing applies to the laws of lending. The poor of your own city take priority over the poor of another city. But if an ani is a non-relative and you have a wealthy person who's a non-relative, the ani takes priority over the usher. He even takes priority over the usher who's a relative, right? So you can have a wealthy brother-in-law and an ani who's not a relative. The ani takes priority if two people come to you for a loan. Okay. V'chol ma sha'amru ani va'asher ani kodem v'ani ercha kodmim kol zedavka kishishnehem b'chinam. But remember, these priorities are when all other things are equal. So let's say, for example, if both loans can be extended for free, it's not going to cost you any money. אבל אם זה שאין לו דין קדימה רוצה לקח ממנו המוס בעסקה שיהיה לו רווח מזה, וכשילווה לזה יפסיד עושה רווח, ואין ידו משגת, אינו מחויב להלווס לזה בחינם. However, we know that there are ways to circumvent the prohibitions of interest on loans. And we know that there's a concept called a heter iska. What if one guy wants to borrow money and he wants to write up a heter iska to turn it into a business investment such that you'll get a return on the loan? And the other guy, who's your relative, wants to borrow money straight out with zero interest. You're allowed to over, go override your relative and lend money to a guy who's going to actually help you make money off of the loan. But but you can't say that with the bank. In other words, you can't say, well, why should I lend you money? I want to put my money in a CD or some other interest bearing. Right. Yeah, it's when you have two mitzvahs to do, and one will help you make money and the other one will not help you make money. וכן אם יש לו מאוס במזומנים, אלא שיודע שבקרוב יבוא לו עסק להרוויח לצורך פרנסתו, אינו צורך להלווסם אם על ידי כך לא יכול לעשות עסק. Similarly, and this is an even bigger chiddush, let's say I have liquid cash, but I'm hoping I can use that money for my own investments. I'm not obligated to lend out that money to do the mitzvah if it'll prevent me from being able to earn money off of that liquidity. So again, that's where it starts to become very subjective. So then maybe I could say, well, I want to put it in a high interest bearing CD, although good luck with that in today's world. It's not too many of those. But there are other investments that a person can make. Every year I get a tax return and I try to put away some of that money in investments. What if a person comes to me and says, I need to borrow the money? So am I obligated to put aside the money that I would normally be making for investments?
You designate it for your RSP contribution.
Yeah, for my RSP is a great example. Okay. Let's see.
So nowhere do we say that we have to try and work for a way of giving to both?
Well, he says, he's quoting let's see, what is he? He's quoting Sefer Avas Chesed from the Chafetz Chaim, that if you have an imminent business investment, it's not like, well, maybe something will come along. That's not enough of an argument, right? If you have an imminent business investment, like an RSP that you put aside every year, or someone has called you and says, I'd like you, I'm looking for investors in this endeavor, in this real estate project or whatever it is. And then someone calls you 5 minutes later and asks you for a loan, you're not obligated to forego that opportunity in order to fulfill the mitzvah of halva. V'siyem. So he just says in the footnotes, he says, V'siyem sham im yavo asher v'yesh lo ma'os betelos. If a wealthy person will come and he says, and he has liquidity, Vaday chayev lahalvosam afal pisha al yedei ze lo yuchal lasos od asakim. He says he's still obligated to do the mitzvah of halva, even though, because you could always make that argument, The Chafetz Chaim says, I acknowledge you can't abuse this heter, because let's say a person is liquid, because he's Baruch Hashem, he has wealth, okay? He can't say if someone wants to borrow money from him, well, I have liquidity, but I may need this money for my future investments, because then you'll always be able to absolve yourself from the mitzvah of halva. He says, the im lokain ein shir ledavar shakol hon lo yaspik lo v'yapatr la'olam mitzvah kesef talva. He says, because if we don't say that, then a person will always be exempt. He'll always find a way to exempt himself from this mitzvah of lending people money. Well, yeah, you never know. I may need that money, right? So, what?
Tomorrow this might turn up.
That's right. So that's why the Chafetz Chaim qualifies as if there has to be an imminent business opportunity that you already know of, that's already been offered to you, and you would have to forego that opportunity in order to fulfill the mitzvah of loans. Only then do we say that you're not mechuyev to lend the money. But if it's just this abstract possibility that I may need that money in the future, that's not enough of an argument to absolve yourself from lending people money. So it's obviously a bit of a gray area, because there's always investment opportunities that people have, right? So you have to use your discretion and let your conscience guide you. Okay, next she'ela. Mi shehilva lechavero sikum shel kesef, ve'achar kach hitbarer shehalo ve'yored min achasa v'choshesh hamalva shechaver lo yachzer lo et ha'alva b'zman hamiyuad. So a guy lent his friend money, and he now discovers that the guy he lent money to, he's gone mechula. He's even worse off now than he was when I gave him the loan. Like, boy, this guy's just crashing and burning. And so you're worried he's not going to be able to pay you back when the loan matures. And so you decide as the lender, you know what, I better protect myself. So you're visiting him one day, and you decide to take the Mickey Mantle baseball card that's on his mantelpiece. Yeah. You go ahead and you just grab it. You say, I better
For leaving it on me.
I better protect myself. Now, he's not saying you're allowed to do this. He's saying if this happened, if the Malva went ahead and grabbed a mashkon, is the Malva, the lender who did this, is he allowed to hold on to the mashkon until the borrower returns the money? Or is it a form of geza?
Sounds like the latter.
Well, no,
Okay, discuss.
Sounds like theft.
Yeah, I
to me.
mean, it sounds, because
We've had this before.
Yeah,
he took
yeah.
it without seeing it, and it wasn't part of the contract that we lent the money.
Correct.
So it's almost like a separate transaction, but there's no transaction, so it's.
Correct.
Legal transaction.
It seems like he should be guilty of theft.
And also the value of it might be more than what he gave.
Right.
The Mickey Mantle card, maybe it's more money, worth more money.
Then you
than
could
what
always
he
give him
gave
back the
last.
difference. If he sells it, you
The-
can always
the-
give him back the difference.
Right,
Like,
the value,
But it's still taking something of more value though.
You could have done that at the outset.
Or maybe it's worth less. Maybe the loan was for $100 grand.
But for collateral, you'll tend to do that. You'll tend to take something that's worth more than what you've loaned as collateral, because that way, at least you're gonna get your money back.
Yeah.
If they'd done that at the outset, that would have been
Different
different.
story.
Yeah.
So I think your spidey senses are working. Asur shahamal v'yasa din la'atzmo. It is asur for the lender to take the law into his own hands. V'im chataf mashkan miyad halova. And if he just decides to grab some collateral item from the lova, or you just go into his house one day and just grab stuff to cover the value of the loan, hareze gazlan. You're a gazlan. The afal pisha chaver chayev asalolasos masha asa. And even though the guy owes you money, you're still not permitted to do that. The chozman shebeis adin lo nasna rishus lasos kain hareze gazlan. Unless the Beis Din gives you permission to do that, you're a total gazlan. And certainly because the loan hasn't matured, you have no right to do something like that.
the loan has matured.
It wouldn't, well, it might make a difference b'di'evet. In other words, there will be a difference in many cases between lechatchila and b'di'evet here. Lechatchila, if someone owes you money, lechatchila, it's usher for you. It's an act of gezel if you go ahead and just grab his items of value. Like pretend you're the marshal and just, burst into his house one day and start being like the repo man and start taking his stuff. That's usher. But in a case where he actually owes you the money, once you've brought it into your possession, Beis Din will not force you to return it because the guy still owes you the money. However, what you've done is still usher. You have to do tshuva for that. I mean, what you did was an avera. So
How do you do tshuva? You have to return it.
So the halacha doesn't require you to return it, but it could be that you have to maybe appease the person and promise him that as soon as he returns the loan, you'll give him back his item, or however you're going to appease him.
Seem better off as a result of the avera.
Yes, there are many times that's true. Like people have this attitude, better to do something without asking than to,
Yeah.
It's
What-
easier to ask for forgiveness.
it's easier to ask for
Yeah.
forgiveness than to what? Than to ask permission? Yeah, right, which is a terrible attitude. It's a terrible thing, but it's so common today.
Wouldn't buy it.
Yeah,
So sorry.
And now that's been recorded.
So if the guy pays the loan and the other guy doesn't want to return, he can go to Bedin and ask for the.
you can go to base then. You can go to Bay if a guy owes you money, you lent him 100 grand.
But the guy pays back the loan and he still has a warranty that he break in until like or whatever guarantee he got. He needs to return it now because the loan is paid.
So that's a bit unclear. Let's say the Basin, I don't know if the Basin will be able to compel him to give back the baseball card. Because when you think about it, if he confiscated it after the loan matured, and then the guy's yelling, "Hey, this is my baseball card. How can you do that?" He takes him to Basin. The Basin will say, "You owed him the money. The loan has been due for the last 6 months. You haven't paid him."
But they're not oppressing people to pay back loans if they can.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, what this guy has done is in violation of the Torah. The Torah says, "Bachutz ta'amod." When someone owes you money and you want to collect the collateral, you have to stand outside and wait for him to give it to you. So the guy's clearly violated the Torah. But b'di'eved,
They both violated.
they both violated the
Yeah.
Torah. Yeah.
Two wrongs don't make a right.
Excellent, right? Yeah.
Good friends.
Yeah, they're gonna have Shabbos meal together on Friday night. It's like that.
So we have in the Gemara, if you take let's say a coach, they have to return it that night so they can use it.
Well, if it's his pajama, let's say, yeah.
So you have to return it so he can use it that night and then.
Right.
Pick it away again.
But it says bachutz tamod. You have to wait until he comes out to give it to you. So let's take a look. What's the source for this halacha? So Kosov Harambam beHilchos Gezela Per Gimel Hachotev Mashgon Miyad Haloi v'Shelo B'Rshus Beis Din Hareze Gazlan. If you grab a collateral item from a borrower without Beis Din's permission, you're a Gazlan. Afal Pishu Hu Chayev Lo, even though he owes you the money. Ve'ein tzarich lomar im nichnas letoch beis chavero u'mashchano shu Gazlan shenemar bachutz tamod. And that's certainly true if you invade his home, his personal space, and take his stuff, right? Umakor ledin zeh sheyotza laharambam kosav harava magid mea mishnah b'shvuas. The Rambam gets this halacha from a Mishnah. It says nigzal keitzad hayom me'idan oso shenichnas lebeis u'lamashkano shelo b'rshus. That if a person, an example of a gazlan is a person who goes and takes what is owed to him by invading his friend's personal space, his house, to take whatever he is owed. Ulam haravid sham heshiv al dvarim sham. However, the Ravid points out something important as a rejoinder. It says lo michavra hamilsa hasam demasnisin mari b'delo hayachayiv lo. He says, the Ravid says, you went into someone's house to take something when the guy didn't owe you money. That's the case of the Mishnah over there. Why is the Rambam saying that that's a case of a gazlan? Mishum hachi chashiv gazlan avalim hayachayiv lo v'nichnas shelo b'shus habeis u'mashkan beis shel aloiva eino kegazlan. But if you go into someone's house without Beis Din's permission and take what is actually owed to you because the guy has a debt, you're not a gazlan according to the Ravid. You may have violated the Torah when it says bachutz ta'amod. You have to stand outside and wait for him, but you're still not a gazlan.
Well, he said, if you lend them a lawnmower, you go back and take the lawnmower.
No, he's saying.
That's what he said, take the keli.
No, he's saying.
No, but it's not a keli that belongs to you.
Yeah, if you
This
lend
is-
him the lawnmower, you
You go and take his.
go take his car until he gives the lawnmower back.
Right.
Buzz.
I'll take the car.
Ulam harav hamagid sham. You haven't seen the lawnmower.
Oh,
You haven't seen the car either.
Get further.
Ulam harav hamagid sham heishiv al divrei haravid b'zeh alosham. So the Magid Mishnah actually, in trying to explain the Rambam and defend the Rambam, states as follows: Ve'ein nira kain miloshan haMishnah damrinan shelo b'rshus. Ve'chein nira midivrei harav ibn Migash apirish sham shelo b'rshus haba'olim v'shelo b'rshus beis din v'yoser v'yeter divrei harav hamasig einan muchram ad kam l'shon. So the Magid Mishnah, basically citing a number of prior authorities, essentially argues, including the Ibn Migash, who was the Rambam's Rebbe. He says, when the Mishnah says you went in without permission of the Beis Din, that that statement implies that if you had gone to Beis Din, they would have given you permission or might have given you permission. So that implies that there was a loan and you're still called a Goslin. V'almasha posach Rambam sham achotef mashkan miyadaloi v'shelo b'rshus Beis Din mikri Goslin l'chora maishna mimad paskinan al pi haGemara bava kama. But let's look at another Gemara. Yochel adam lasos din la'atzmo im roa shelo biyad acher shegazlo. Yochel kachas miyada. That this is Izzy's case. The Gemara in Bava Kama says that if you see someone holding on to something that belongs to you, that illegally he's taken something from you, you have the right to take the law into your own hands and grab it away from him. V'im acher omeid kenegdo yochel lahakoso ad shiani chenu. And if someone is trying to stop you physically from gaining access, you may use physical force through exchanging blows. Well, this won't go over well in Canada, right? Until the guy lets go of the item. That's my Mickey Mantle baseball card. You give it to me, or you're not going to leave this room without having to go to the hospital. But you better make sure that it's really yours before you threaten him. They say nifsek berambam behilchos Sanhedrin perik beis halacha yud beis, and that's how the Rambam paskins. So why is it okay sometimes to take the law into your own hands, and sometimes it's not okay? So he quotes now from the Torah: "Achareisha pasak yachal adam lasos din la'atzman rosh lo b'yad acher shegazlo hostav sham mikol makom ein lo rishus lamashkano b'chova." But that's only when the item that you know is yours is in the other guy's possession. But if someone just owes you money, you're not allowed to forcibly take something as a compensation for what he owes you. V'ulai hachiluk desham behaloiva kevin diyesh edim ina mikivin shichol letovo bedin v'abesin yorlun chasav ma she'ein kein begazlan she'ef shalatovo ledin mishum hachi matzi avid inish dina v'chula. Kein yirol aniyastaiti. And the Torah says the difference is when there are witnesses on a loan, you have the ability to take him to Beis Din. So the Beis Din hasn't given you permission to take the law into your own hands. You have to wait. You have to go through the judicial process. But when a guy stole from you and you don't have the ability to take him to court because you don't have evidence that he stole from you, then you can take the law into your own hands. So the Shulchan Aruch paskins like the Rambam, who says that if you grab someone's property without permission, even though he owes you money, you are a Goslin. And but the Shach then says, by doing so, you're not a conventional Goslin. A conventional Goslin is pasul la'edus, cannot be a kosher witness. But you could still be a kosher witness. In other words, if you went in and grabbed someone's property because they owed you money, you can still be my aide at my daughter's wedding under the chuppah.
You're a Goslin light.
You're a Goslin light. Right. The lo mashmalahu leinshi dilihavi Goslin bahachi. And the Shach argues is that people don't consider themselves a Goslin. In other words, people feel very, righteously indignant. This guy hasn't stiffed me for the money he owes me, so I'll show him. And so he doesn't consider himself this. Certainly not considered. He doesn't think about himself as a Goslin. So the Shach says, "V'lo yadati amai kasav kach b'pshitus tam divrei arayvid ve'harav hamagid v'hator mashmad laram misham nifsal leidus ve'hiskem imo harav hamagid." So I'm sorry. The Shach was quoting the Bedek Habayis that you're not pasul leidus, but the Shach disagrees. Shach says no, you are pasul leidus because you are a Goslin.
So it doesn't matter whether the loan has matured or not matured as to when this person goes in and grabs the piece of land.
Yeah, he doesn't.
They don't define it like.
Either way,
to the end or
either way, you're a Goslin if you do it without Beis Din's permission. Correct. Okay. So this is sort of an adjacent halacha to the laws of loans, but I guess he's bringing everything in. Let me just see if, what are we up to? Okay, next. Next Shayla. Misha Iker Parnasaso Bahalvaos Shenosein Lagoy Beribis. Aim Yesha Lavchiyav Lahalvos Li Israel. O Kolsham Isparnes Mehagoy Eno Mechuyev. What if a person is in the money lending business? And that's how he makes his money, by lending money to non-Jews and charging interest. He's in the financing business. They don't call it money lending anymore because that has, the Shylock implications. So I'm in the financing business, finance projects. It makes it sound so much more sanitary and non-Jewish, right? So I'm in the financing business. I give business loans to people who need business loans, and they pay me back the loan with interest. Then a Yid comes over to me and says, I want an interest-free loan. So do I have a right to say to him, I'm sorry, but my business model, this is my parnasa. My parnasa is lending money with interest. I'm exempt, therefore, from this mitzvah because this is how I make my parnasa. Is that a legitimate claim? Can a person make that argument?
Yes and no. He would have connection. I would hope that even being a chesed, he would find someone that was willing to do that. He's well connected. Maybe some of his clients have the money. But also find a way. But it depends on the income.
Well, but we've also learned that if you at the time have an immediate ability to earn money from the money.
But that is his business. It's constantly lending money out to people with interest.
Well, one of the things you could argue is
So therefore, it constantly has this ability to be able to say, "Oh no, I have a better offer."
Well, what if the guy lends money to both Jews and non-Jews in the community? With the Jews, he does a heteriska. And this guy comes to him and says, I want you to lend me money, and I don't want a heteriska, I want an interest-free loan. And you have an obligation, it's your mitzvah to do. Is that a good argument? Or can the guy say, if I give you a loan with zero interest, I'm going to have a long line of Yiddelach who are going to come to me and say, so is that a mitigating factor? So he has an interesting way of resolving this. He says, Misha Iker Parnasaso Bahalvolagoy Beribis, Eno Chayiv Lahalvos Li Yisrael. So he says, you're not obligated to loan the money to a Jew if that's your business. Ella im kein ha-Yisrael hu ani b'tzarach ma'os l'tzarchei achila. Unless the Jew is really poor and he needs the money for food. In that situation, you have an obligation to figure out how this one particular guy you will make a loan to with zero interest because you're obligated for tzedakah anyway. But he says, I only want to borrow the money, so you have to lend him the money with zero interest. But if the
guy was saying that he was asking for money for food, and you gave it to him as a loan, you have to be of the opinion you're not going to get paid back.
Not necessarily. No, the guy may tell you, I'm expecting a huge commission at the end of the month. But right now, I can't even support my family. I don't even have money for groceries. That's a very legitimate thing. So he says he does qualify as an ani at that moment. At that moment, yeah. And obviously, if you can accomplish both without compromising your business, then you have an obligation also. In other words, there are plenty of scenarios that we could create where it doesn't affect my business model because I'm primarily lending money to, let's say, financing small business loans, right? And this guy's coming to me for a personal loan. So there are always ways that you can figure out how to be able to do a chesed without it violating or interrupting your regular business. Have a wonderful Shabbos, everybody. Mirza Hashem will continue Monday.